Hello, so right now we are going to go through and I am going to show you how I would annotate or how I would read this speech here given by George W. Bush if we're thinking about it in terms of the rhetorical triangle and the soapstone, which you guys should have just watched those videos on that. So now, before we start, I want to say that we are going to be reading a lot of speeches by both sides and all different walks of life, of thinking, and of views. And so what I'm going to do here is go through and try to pick out those places where the rhetorical triangle is being used. I'm not trying to necessarily say that I believe or think this one thing which way or another about a person. I'm just trying to show you guys that even in the best of speeches, they're using ethos, pathos, and logos, and we need to be aware of how someone is trying to change our mind in a speech by getting us to think, okay, this is what they're thinking, even if we agree, even if we're like, okay, well, that pathos worked on me, like, I am feeling emotional. We also need to be able to recognize why it is that we're feeling emotional, or what's going on, or how that person is using that emotion to sway us, whether or not we choose to believe it or not. So, just kind of a primer for all of the speeches we're going to read, especially in this rhetoric section, about all of that. So here we have President George Bush. Oh, and you should have your own copy of this open and be annotating as we're going along, or making notes on however you want to as we go along with this. You don't need to turn this in. This is just for your own practice to see how I would do it. So we have President George W. Bush here. So that is our speaker. And then we see 9/11 address to the nation. So this is our occasion. So, important to recognize this, and then also that it is on 9/11. So this speech happened right after the 9/11 attacks happened. You guys probably don't have much memory of that. I think you guys are all born after 9/11, which is a terrifying thought. I was pretty young back then, but I still do have some memories of it. So let's jump into the speech. Good evening. So, we have George W. Bush setting. That's a welcome to everyone. It's a pretty standard. He's not just jumping into the speech, he's taking that moment to address and greet them. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist attacks. So I would say all of this stuff right here, that is pathos, because he is trying to get you personally to agree with what he's saying. He's bringing you into it. He's not saying fellow citizens, or, well, he's not saying a way of life or freedom in general. He's saying your freedom, your way of life, your citizens. He's making you feel like you want to be a part of something. That's a pretty good method that a lot of people will use, is that if they make you feel like you're a part of some group, you are more likely to agree with what they think. So then he says they came under a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist attacks. Those two words there, deliberate and deadly. We would notice the word choice there, very specific. He is telling you exactly how to think about these terrorist attacks, that they are deliberate and mostly that they are deadly. In itself, using terrorist acts probably would already say that, but, you know, using the words deliberate and deadly, he is going that one step further and telling you, you should think that this was something awful. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businesswomen, men and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. So once again, with this stuff right here, we have a really good example of him using pathos again. He is giving you a list of telling you all the people that have died in this attack. So even if you were feeling like, oh, okay, like, you know, well, who really died? He's telling you it's everyday people. He's telling you it's secretary, it's businessmen and women, it's the military and federal workers. But then he takes it a step further. He pauses and he goes, moms and dads. Most people have a mom and a dad, and that the idea of parents makes them emotional. Friends and neighbors. Even if you are not on a great relationship with your mom and dad, you have friends, you have neighbors. Once again, he's trying to make you feel like this could have been anyone. It was anyone. It was people, normal, everyday people. Like, you know, yes, they were military and federal workers, but they were parents, they were friends, they were neighbors. The idea that this happened was awful. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. So once again, we have word choice here. He's very specifically saying this is how you should feel about it. Evil, despicable. He's not saying these lives are ended by a terrorist attack. These were evil. This was despicable. This is awful. You should feel like it's all of these things. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing have filled us with disbelief, a terrible sadness, and a quiet, unrelenting anger. So once again, once again, telling us how to feel. So if you're sitting there and you're feeling, well, I'm not sure how to feel, he's saying you should feel angry, you should feel sad, you should be almost like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened. But then he says, we're gonna give you pictures. Airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing. I would even say that you could call this logos. Like, he's giving you something to refer back to. If you were watching the news when this was happening, which most people were, like, you would remember these ideas very vividly, and you could even say that this is pathos for a lot of people, especially those that were watching this happen, because that was an awful, awful moment that people remember seeing. Like, it was terrifying. But he's grounding that in something where people can be like, okay, even if maybe you weren't on board with the idea that these things happened, he's saying, like, remember that these things happened, and rooting it in almost that logic and, like, these things did happen. Whether or not, you come forward and you think that you're a conspiracy theorist, these ideas did happen. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat, but they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defeat a great nation. So once again, he's saying, hey, don't worry, we're in a great nation, we're super strong, we're gonna be okay. So he's saying, like, despite all this, despite this anger, despite this sadness, despite this disbelief you have, you are gonna get through this. So he is saying, it's fine, you're gonna be okay, like, we are all going to collectively be okay. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundation of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America is targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon of freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. So this right here, once again, pathos, reassurance. Like, this awful, terrible thing has just happened. It really threw the nation into terror, and so he's standing here and being like, look, I'm acknowledging that you guys are terrified, like, and that's totally okay, but you have to remember, we are a strong nation, and he's basically saying we're attacked because people were afraid that we were that strong. How true or not that is, it makes people feel, oh, okay, this is something we can overcome, this is something that we're gonna be able to come back from. Today, our nation saw evil in the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers and the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help any way that they could. So once again, pathos and logos a little bit right there, being like, these are good people that came, but he's also saying, like, citing things where, like, that rescue workers came, that a lot of people came and offered their services and people gave blood, like, people were doing all of these things. Once again, this is something where even though the way that he's describing them is based within pathos, based in that emotion, wanting you to feel like, yes, these are great workers, it's also things that people did that you could look up, and it's saying, like, so now he's on a way, he gave a claim. It's like writing a paper, and now he's giving support and saying, this is why we're great. This is how people stepped up to the plate. So immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get those who have been injured to take every precaution and protect our citizens' homes and from further attacks. So this is an example of ethos there. So yes, he is the president of the United States, so obviously he has some sort of authority to be talking on this topic, but he is showing us the authority that he has. He's telling us specifically, this is what I did. So now we're stepping away from the we. He's saying, this is what I personally have done to be able to help you guys. This is all within his plan that he's trying to reassure people, so he is giving them a sense of transparency by saying, exactly after following the attacks, this is how I made our nation safer. So you could also say this is pathos in a sense because he's reassuring the people, but I would say that this is a lot of ethos in showing, as a president, this is what I've done to help. The function of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which have to be evacuated, are reopening for the essential people tonight and will reopen for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. Logos, once again, a little bit of pathos, like American economy is strong, like, you know, giving very reassuring words, once again saying, like, okay, this is what I've done, but this is what the world is going to do tomorrow, so just giving that logic, like, hey, not only are we actually really strong, but this is why we're strong, because we're going to reopen tomorrow, and everything's going to be okay. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources for our intelligence and law enforcement committees to find those responsible and bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who have committed these acts and those that harbor them. Once again, I'd say that's some ethos that he's saying. Once again, this is what we're doing. This is how I am making you guys feel safe. This is how the community is making people feel safe. So he's giving himself, like, giving the people that sort of reassurance. I appreciate so much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks, and on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. So right here we have, I'd say this is pathos. He's thanking people. He's making people feel appreciated for what they've done. And he's also, in this sense, giving this warning. He's saying, okay, I thank the members of Congress. The people that agree with me. I think the many world leaders. I would even say that this could be logos and ethos. Like, once again, he's referencing world leaders, showing that sort of, reminding people, like, I connect to world leaders. It's logos because he's, citing other world leaders, also think that this is terrible. So once again, just really honing in on that idea, like, this is bad, here is why it is bad. This event that happened. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together in a war against terrorism. Pathos. He's telling you how to feel about this, even if you're not from the US, he's telling you this is how you should feel about this event that happened. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all of those who grieve, for the children who have been shattered, for those whose safety and security have been threatened, and I will pray to be comforted by the powers in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. So we have this prayer here. Pathos. At the time this happened, there was obviously other religions in America, but Christianity was and still is a pretty huge religion that happens to be what a lot of people believe, and even at this time, this would have been very strongly, most people listening to this would have been Catholic, especially after an event like this, which kind of they definitely went anti-other religions for a little bit after this, but, that's what happened. But for the people watching this, this would have very strongly, even if they didn't like Bush, made them like him a little bit more, because he's using religion, he's using something that people consider to be a cornerstone of their personality, and this is probably a cornerstone of himself, but still using it very specifically. He's not doing it to soothe himself, he's doing it to soothe others. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do the same again. Pathos, making people feel like a group, being like, now that you're part of this group, this is what we're doing. None of us will ever forget this day. We will go forward and defend freedom that is all for good and justice in our world. Good night, and God bless America. Pathos, religion. So we're running out of time. I only have 15 minutes on this, recorder that I use, but so you can see. So that's how I would see it. And then if you scroll down, go through and try to highlight those times that I said. And here is also the soapstone that relates. You can look through this and kind of use this as a guide for when you do your own, which is going to be at ground zero a couple days later. All of that is on Canvas. so happy annotating, annotate in the comments like I did there, and then do a comparison.